Hello there, and welcome to SaberDuel Gaming, where we always take the high ground. And welcome to a retro review of Star Wars Battlefront 2. This is specifically, though, the Celebration Edition, and we are going to give a little bit of backstory as to why that is, looking at the original release of the game and its eventual adaptation into the version available right now. So the Star Wars Battlefront franchise goes all the way back to the PlayStation 2 version in 2004. However, it's the 2015 Star Wars Battlefront on the PlayStation 4 that this was a sequel to. That game was released as an empty shell of a game with barely any real content until available on DLC. The Star Wars Battlefront 2 release had to really overcome a great deal of negativity from the fanbase on the PlayStation as well as the Star Wars community as a whole. So it was important that when it was released, it had a proper single-player game, which its prequel lacked, as well as a whole host of varied options to keep the fans entertained, not to mention getting rid of the bad taste that was left in everyone's mouths from the original. The trailers were promising, with a full single-player story mode that managed to bridge the gap between Return of the Jedi and the sequel trilogy. This gave fans something specific to look forward to from a single-player perspective, whilst knowing that the majority of the additional features were going to be set as online gaming or multiplayer, so hopefully it would have a bit of everything. However, what we got was still not what we actually wanted. The online site, Wikipedia, actually identified that this game had 3 times the content that was in the original. However, that's kinda like saying something was 3 times better than being slapped in the face. It still doesn't make it particularly good. For every compliment of the multiplayer mode, there was comments about the convoluted progression system. For every bit of praise around the new story mode, there was comments that it started strong but got weaker as it went along, and was substantially too short and too easy. Most notably, as is often the case, there was a lot of criticism for the constant loot box microtransaction nonsense that littered the game. It won awards for best graphics, best audio, and some awards for its multiplayer modes, but also won the award of most disappointing game of the year, so it was hardly a nailed-on classic at this point. The reviews and the opinions on it were so mixed. The game received scores of anything between 4 out of 10 to 7 out of 10, depending on your tolerance for microtransactions and whether you were happy to constantly pay for additional downloadable content every time a new update came out. 2 years later, in 2019, however, we received the Star Wars Battlefront 2 Celebration Edition. This version of the game came out once they decided that there was going to be no further major updates, and instead released this edition of the game that came with all the DLC, all of the characters unlocked, and the option to unlock all of the additional outfits, skins, looks for the characters. And this version of the game was undeniably beautiful, with all of the DLC that had been made for the game included, with all of the characters unlocked without the need for microtransactions and loot boxes and all that other crap. What we had was the most comprehensive and complete Star Wars game you could ever want. Granted, the story player mode was still limited, but actually now you had an additional campaign to play as well that furthered the adventures of Ed and Verso. We had all of the characters you wanted to play in Heroes v Villains and all the online modes. This was the most beautiful version of the game available, and it was so enjoyable. For many, including myself, this game was actually free to download on PS4 when I first played it, but it had been available for a little while before then, and lots of people found that this was the game that they should always have had from the first place. I know there were some reasons why not all of the content would have been available, but for now what I want to focus on is this game itself. This version of the game, how good is it? Well, from a single player mode, now you have the original campaign story mode, which is really quite good. Yes, some people may not be as enamoured with these original characters, but I actually found them quite relatable, and their story and perspective of starting off with the Empire and progressing into the Rebellion really quite interesting. You also have the sequel, in a sense, to it, which is quite small, but in itself is a really interesting story. Seeing these characters that we have seen during the time of the end of the Empire working their way towards the time of the First Order in the sequel trilogy. Whether or not you like the sequel trilogy, it still gives more depth to the stories. And even offline, there are other single-player modes, including the challenges, where you take on board a set 2 characters and you have to complete a certain number of kills, for example. These aren't exactly the most fun part of the game, but it does give you another option. However, this game is a game that was designed for multiplayer and especially online play, and that is where the game truly flourishes. The 2 main online game modes, those being Galactic Assault and Supremacy, put you in one of the 3 main time periods from the movies: the Clone Wars, the Galactic Civil War, or the time of the First Order. From this, you're allocated one of the main factions to play as and compete against the other faction from that time period. Unfortunately, there's no sort of fantasy mode in which you can compete across time periods, but that's just wishful thinking. The maps on which you play are usually those set from within the movies, although some are from within the Clone Wars as well, and these do vary. Some of them are really fun to explore, and usually these are ones that we see a lot in the films, such as Tatooine or Hoth. Others are just obnoxiously annoying, the main one being Felucia. Yes, Felucia, we hate your guts. From this point on, you either go on the offensive or defend territory, you play as the different classes of soldiers, and try and earn enough points to access special characters or the hero characters, where the game really becomes substantially more fun. Leveling up the characters to improve them and to unlock new skill cards is a little bit of a chore, but at least there are set days during the week where you can access triple or double points, so that does make it a little bit less of a grind. Unfortunately, in one of the clear examples where there is a bit of a step backwards, unlike the original Star Wars Battlefront games from the mid-2000s, there's no option mid-campaign to suddenly just jump into a starship and engage in starfighter assault. You unfortunately have to choose one or the other and play it out that way, which is a shame, but I suppose the quality of gameplay has dramatically improved, so we'll let that slide. While there are other game modes as well, such as Ewok Hunt. God, I hate Ewok Hunt. The main other game mode online is Heroes v Villains. This can be done in a number of different ways, again, such as in Starfighter, 4-on-4, or Heroes v Villains Showdown, 2v2, a best of 3. These are all substantially more arcadey fun. They don't allow you to play as these stormtroopers and stuff, but who really cares when you can access Sith and Jedi and other fantastic hero characters? There are a few really unusual choices in the Hero v Villains with regards to the roster of characters. For example, BB-8 and his dark side equivalent are really strange choices, when we could instead have had Clone Wars classics like Ahsoka and Asajj Ventress. And also, in the Heroes v Villains Starfighter mode, having 3 different versions of the Millennium Falcon is a massive wasted opportunity, where other ships could easily have replaced them. Let's be honest, the reason I'm nitpicking so much on these is because I've sank so many hours into the online game modes of this game. That has to say a lot, and what it says is, it's great fun, it's enjoyable, and it really sucks you in. This game has really peaked, and whilst there are definite improvements we could make for a new game, I don't think we can complain about the game that actually is there now. It's top drawer, no doubt. When it comes to ranking this, I really have to review it differently. There's been so many different Star Wars games that have either satisfied or disappointed us in their own different ways. But this game has done something that none of those have done. It started off as disappointing and borderline offensive, but like Darth Vader himself, it came back from the brink and redeemed itself dramatically. Star Wars Battlefront 2, I think overall the Celebration Edition is worthy of an 8.5 out of 10 rating. It really has turned to the light side. Thanks for watching. Please give us a comment below and feel free to subscribe right here on YouTube, Instagram or TikTok.